They say the war lasted 3 hours. That's a lie. The war lasted exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds. The rest was just cleanup. Admiral Court Maroon had presided over 14 genocides before breakfast became a problem. Not the act itself. The Korvathi had long since systematized extinction into a bureaucratic process, complete with efficiency metrics and performance reviews. No, the problem was that Court could no longer remember what he'd eaten that morning, or yesterday morning. The meals blurred together like the civilizations. Nutritionally adequate, strategically necessary, ultimately forgettable. He stood on the bridge of the Eternal Victory, his flagship, watching the tactical display render 299 other Korvathi warships in crisp holographic detail. Each icon represented between 2,000 and 5,000 crew members. Each ship carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Together, they were the largest armada the Korvathi supremacy had assembled in 47 years. Status, Court said, his mandibles clicking with practiced authority. All ships report combat ready. Admiral, his tactical officer, Ven replied. Formation holding at 99.7% precision. We are 13 minutes from translation into the Kepler 186 system. 13 minutes until the human colony world of New Taipei became number 15 on a list that Court kept in a locked file he never opened. The list had names like precedent established and territorial clarification and other phrases that meant the same thing. We were here, now we're here, and whatever was in between no longer exists. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency. 300 ships moving as one organism, their fusion drives synchronized to the microsecond. The Korvathi didn't believe in chance. They believed in mathematics. And mathematics said that 300 warships versus one frontier colony resulted in 100% probability of compliance or extinction. Court's tactical board showed the intelligence brief he'd memorized 3 days ago. New Taipei. Population 47,000. Light industrial base. Minimal defensive installations. Strategic value negligible. The kind of target the Korvathi hit to make a point, not to acquire territory. The point being, you embarrassed us at the negotiation table, so now we demonstrate consequences. Political theater performed with antimatter warheads. 10 minutes, Vin announced. Court felt nothing. He'd felt nothing for the last 6 genocides. Command had sent him to a military psychologist after the 10th campaign, concerned that emotional detachment might impair judgment. The psychologist had concluded that Court was optimally calibrated for his role and recommended no changes. Optimally calibrated, like a targeting computer. Translation in 5 minutes. All ships confirmed jump coordinates. The bridge's lighting shifted to combat blue. Automated systems ran final weapons checks. Court watched icons flicker across his display. Missile tubes loaded, rail cannons charged, shield generators at maximum. 300 ships carrying enough destructive power to crack a continent. All focused on one unremarkable colony that had the misfortune of existing when the supremacy needed to send a message. Translation in 60 seconds. Court's comm officer, a young female named Shrell, looked up from her station. Admiral, we're receiving automated broadcasts from the Kepler 186 system. Standard civilian traffic, emergency protocols, navigation beacons. No military chatter detected. As expected, they know we're coming and they know they can't fight. Mark the colony's communication arrays as secondary targets. I want them able to transmit their surrender. Understood, Admiral. Translation in 10 seconds. The bridge fell silent, except for the low thrum of the Eternal Victory's fusion cores spinning up to combat power. Court checked his personal sidearm, a ceremonial weapon he'd never fired but always carried. Tradition dictated that an admiral should be armed during first contact. Translation in 3, 2 mark. The universe folded. For exactly 2.7 seconds, the Korvathi extermination fleet existed in a quantum state between locations. Their mass redistributed across 11 dimensions, while computers older than most civilizations calculated re-entry vectors. Then space snapped back to normal with a flash of Cherenkov radiation, and 300 warships materialized in the Kepler 186 system like a steel fist closing around a throat. All ships report successful translation, Ven said. Formation integrity maintained. Target system acquired. Beginning tactical scan. He stopped. Court's mandibles twitched. Report. Contact. Admiral. Single vessel. Range. 400,000 kilometers. Bearing. Directly ahead, blocking our approach vector. The main view screen flickered to life, magnifying the contact. One ship. Court stared at it for 3 full seconds before his brain categorized what he was seeing. It was old. Not old like a veteran ship that had seen hard service. Old like a museum piece someone had inexplicably decided to crew and deploy. The hull showed damage patterns from at least 5 different weapon types, patched with materials that didn't match the original construction. Scarring from plasma burns ran along the starboard side. The port shield emitter housing looked like it had been replaced with components from an entirely different ship class. The vessel's profile matched human design aesthetics from 60, maybe 70 years ago. Blocky, inelegant, built for function over form with fusion drives that produced a thermal signature indicating maybe 40% efficiency. Modern human ships ran at 76% minimum. Designation? Court asked. Ven consulted his sensors. Transponder identifies her as TFS Remembrance. Terran Federation Registry. Mass approximately 800 meters length. Cruiser or possibly heavy destroyer class. I'm reading. Admiral. I'm reading minimal weapon signatures. Standard missile tubes. Possibly some rail cannons. But nothing that should threaten even our lightest escorts. Fleet support. Negative. No additional contacts detected within sensor range. She's alone. Court felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Confusion. The humans weren't stupid. They had to know that New Taipei was indefensible. The strategic calculus was simple. Evacuate civilians. File a diplomatic protest. Negotiate reparations later. Sending one obsolete warship to face 300 Corvathi vessels wasn't courage. It was insanity. Unless. Full spectrum analysis. Court ordered. I want to know everything about that ship. Hull composition, power output, weapons loadout, crew complement, communications frequencies, everything. His sensor officer, a grizzled veteran named Thek, worked his console with practiced efficiency. Scanning now. Admiral. Hull is standard titanium ceramic composite, matching human military specifications from the 2190s. Power signature indicates fusion reactors operating at 67% capacity. I'm detecting what appears to be standard offensive shields, though the field geometry is irregular, probably due to the mismatched components. Weapons. Confirmed missile tubes, rail cannons, possibly point defense lasers. No energy weapons detected. No exotic signatures. Crew complement estimated at 200 to 300 based on life support readings. Threat assessment. Thek didn't hesitate. Negligible, Admiral. That ship couldn't scratch our shields, even if we gave her a free shot. Court nodded slowly. The confusion crystallized into certainty. This was a gesture, a symbolic stand. The humans knew they'd lose but needed to be seen trying. It was almost respectful. Open a channel, Court ordered. Let's make this quick. Shrell's claws danced across her console. Channel open, Admiral. The view screen split. On one side, the ancient human ship hung in the void like a relic from a war museum. On the other, a human face appeared. Male, maybe 50 years old. Though humans aged oddly in Court had never quite mastered their biological markers. Asian features. Court thought that was the right term. Gray hair cut short. Simple fleet uniform with minimal rank insignia. 3 silver bars on the collar, indicating Captain, Commander. Human rank structures were unnecessarily complicated. The man's expression was patient, almost serene. His eyes held the kind of calm that Court associated with meditation or deep fatigue. This is Captain Marcus Chun of the TFS Remembrance, the human said. His voice was conversational, like he was greeting a neighbor rather than an extinction fleet. You are violating Terran territorial space under Section 7 of the Boundary Protocols. Turn your fleet around and leave immediately. Court felt his mandibles twitch in what might have been amusement. Captain Chun, he said, keeping his voice measured and professional. I am Admiral Court Vasmaroon of the Corvathi Supremacy. I command 300 warships. You have one aging vessel that my sensors indicate was already obsolete when your grandfather was young. Be reasonable. We will allow New Taipei's population to evacuate before we establish our presence. You have 6 hours to organize the refugee ships. Chin's expression didn't change. No. Court's amusement grew. Captain, I appreciate symbolic gestures, but this is not a negotiation. You cannot win this engagement. You cannot even survive it. Stand down, and you may live to turn back, Chin repeated. Same tone, same patient calm. This is your final warning. Court leaned forward, all 4 of his eyes focused on the human captain's face. Or what, Captain Chun? You'll fight us. 1 ship against 300. For the first time, something flickered in Chin's expression. Not fear, not anger. Something closer to resignation, sadness. Admiral, Chin said quietly, how many ships do you think you'll have left if you proceed? The question hung in the space between them. Court barked a laugh that echoed across the bridge. Several officers joined in. The idea that this antique ship could threaten even one of their escorts was absurd. The possibility that it could threaten the entire fleet was beyond ridiculous. It entered the realm of mathematical impossibility. "Captain Shun," Court said, fighting down his amusement, "I admire your courage. Truly, but courage is not armor. Stand down, or I will demonstrate the consequences of symbolic resistance." Chin's eyes held Court's gaze for a long moment. Then, with what might have been a sigh, the human captain nodded slowly. "Okay," Chin said. "Don't say I didn't warn you." The transmission cut. Court turned to his tactical officer. "Forward formation. Target the human vessel first. I want it disabled, not destroyed. Their captain has earned a clean death rather than slow suffocation in a crippled ship. Then, coordinate with Admiral." Thek's voice cracked with urgency. "The human ship, it's powering weapons." Court pulled up his tactical display. Expected to see missile locks, rail gun charging sequences, standard engagement protocols for a doomed ship making a final gesture. Instead, his board lit up with warnings he'd never seen before. Electromagnetic pulse generators detected. "Admiral, those power signatures aren't possible. Quantum field disruptors online. That's banned technology. Something else. Multiple somethings. I can't identify them. The energy signatures don't match any known weapon system. Admiral, local physics are changing." Court stared at his display. The remembrance hadn't moved, hadn't maneuvered, just sat there in the void for 100,000 kilometers away, like a teacher standing before a classroom of particularly slow students. Then it fired. The remembrance didn't fire projectiles. It fired impossibility. The lead Corvathi battleship, Glorious Conquest, pride of their northern fleet, veteran of 8 campaigns, carrier of 5,000 crew, simply stopped. Every system simultaneously failed. Lights died. Power disappeared. Life support ceased. And then the hull began collapsing inward. Not from explosive decompression, not from structural failure. The ship's atoms were forgetting how to maintain their bonds. Matter compressing into something that should have required a black hole's gravity well, but was happening in normal space, mediated by technology that Court's sensors insisted couldn't exist. Inside Glorious Conquest, 5,000 Corvathi crew members experienced instantaneous entropy acceleration. Their bodies didn't explode or burn or freeze. They unmade. Cells forgot their structure. Molecules released their bonds. Atoms drifted apart like dandelion seeds on a wind that blew through dimensions the Corvathi had never discovered. 3 seconds after firing, the Glorious Conquest was gone. Not destroyed, erased. Reduced to a cloud of component atoms that sparkled in the starlight like industrial waste. Evasive action. Court screamed. "All ships, scatter formation. Evasive." Too late. The remembrance wasn't fighting 300 ships the way fleets normally fought, with missiles and beams and kinetic impactors. It was methodically demonstrating technical superiority the way a university professor might demonstrate basic physics to freshmen. Each weapon system activated in sequence, each more impossible than the last. Ships exploded without being hit, their fusion reactors suddenly forgetting the electromagnetic principles that made fusion possible, releasing their energy in millisecond bursts that vaporized everything within a kilometer. Shields failed without being breached, their generators receiving data packets that convinced them their own defense fields were the true threat, causing them to redirect all power into destroying themselves. Crews disappeared without being killed, entire vessels going dark as something reached into them and simply switched off every biological process simultaneously, leaving ships full of corpses drifting in mathematically perfect formation. And through it all, the remembrance remained still, not maneuvering, not evading return fire, just hanging in space like a monument, demonstrating lessons that the Corvathi fleet was learning far too quickly and far too late. Court watched his tactical display turn into a slaughterhouse. Icons vanishing, telemetry signals cutting out, emergency beacons activating, and then dying as the ships broadcasting them ceased to exist. 43 ships gone in the first minute, 71 in the second. His weapons officers were screaming firing solutions, but nothing reached the human ship. Missiles detonated prematurely. Their guidance systems fed corrupted data that convinced them they'd already hit their target. Railgun slugs traveled 3/4 of the distance, and then simply stopped, hanging in space like someone had paused a video. Energy weapons, their most powerful ship killers, capable of burning through planetary shields, bent around the remembrance, as if the ship existed in a space where normal physics were optional. All ships. Court's voice cracked. Full retreat. Maximum speed. Scatter formation. Get out of range. But what was the range of weapons that rewrote physics? How did you flee from something that could reach inside your ship and tell your atoms to remember they had better things to do than hold together? The armada scattered. 300 ships that had moved as one perfect organism now broke apart like a school of fish encountering a predator, each vessel desperately calculating individual survival odds. Captain Shin's voice returned to all channels. Quiet, patient, exactly as it had been before. I warned you, he said. You have 10 seconds to begin retreat maneuvers. Ships that comply will be spared. Ships that don't will serve as examples. Court looked at his tactical display through the green haze of his own terror. 57 ships already gone. The rest fleeing in random vectors, abandoning all formation discipline in their panic to escape. All ships, Court whispered into the fleet-wide channel. Full retreat. Maximum speed. Comply immediately. He watched his mighty armada run. Watched 300 warships, 2 centuries of military engineering, the pride of the Korvathi supremacy, flee from one obsolete human cruiser like children running from a nightmare. The Remembrance ceased firing. Ships that were fleeing survived. Ships that had tried to maintain engagement posture for even 3 seconds after the order didn't. Court counted the losses. 94 ships. Over 200,000 crew. Gone in less than 4 minutes of engagement. And then Captain Shun spoke one more time. Admiral Court. The human's voice was almost gentle. You may keep 10 ships. The rest are forfeit. Court's world became very small and very cold. What, he whispered. The Remembrance's weapons pulsed again. Not the reality-breaking horrors from before. This was something different. Something almost surgical in its precision. 247 Korvathi warships, including Court's flagship, the Eternal Victory, stopped as if someone had flipped a switch. Not destroyed, not disabled, just stopped, and then they disassembled. At the molecular level, Court watched through his failing view screen as his ship came apart around him. Not violently, not with explosions or fire. The hull plating simply released its atomic bonds and drifted away in perfect geometric patterns. Bulkheads dissolved. Consoles evaporated into their component elements. He should have died. His entire bridge, crew, should have died. But whatever force was taking his ship apart recognized the difference between vessel and crew, between steel and flesh. Court found himself floating in space, somehow alive, somehow breathing, somehow protected by a force field he couldn't detect. Watching 247 Korvathi warships reduce themselves to clouds of carefully organized atoms. The atoms didn't scatter. They arranged themselves, formed patterns, spelled out words visible from light years away, written in letters 1,000 kilometers tall. Boundaries matter. Court floated there for 3 hours before the 10 surviving Korvathi ships, the ones Chun had graciously allowed to remain intact, collected the 30,000 crew members who had been carefully extracted from their disassembled vessels and placed in protective fields. Not a single crew member had been harmed. Not one injury. Not even a bruise from the sudden decompression that should have killed them all. The Remembrance waited until every survivor was recovered. Then Captain Shen's face appeared one final time on the emergency frequencies. Admiral Court, he said, when you return to your supremacy, please deliver a message. The Terran Federation maintains defensive installations on all our border worlds. What you encountered today was one of our older models. We have 847 others like her, and 200 that are significantly more advanced. We do not seek conflict, but we will not permit aggression. Choose your next actions carefully. The transmission ended. Court made the journey home in a borrowed cabin on the cruiser Defiant Edge, one of the 10 ships Chun had allowed to survive. He spent most of the trip staring at reports he couldn't process, trying to understand how one ship had done what entire fleets shouldn't have been able to accomplish. The Supremacy convened an emergency military tribunal. They wanted explanations, wanted to understand how Admiral Court Vas Maroon, architect of 14 successful genocides, had lost 290 ships to one obsolete human cruiser. Court told them the truth. The ship hadn't been obsolete. The weapons hadn't been standard. The humans had been playing games during diplomatic negotiations, hiding capabilities that made the Korvathi look like children with sharpened sticks. The tribunal demanded he prove it. Demanded tactical data, demanded sensor logs. Court provided everything, showed them the recordings of ships unmaking themselves, showed them the mathematical impossibilities that had written "boundaries matter" in atomic letters across half the star system. The tribunal's senior admiral, an ancient Korvathi named Thrace who had overseen the Supremacy's military for 30 years, reviewed the evidence for 6 hours. Then he looked at Court with all 4 eyes and said something Court would remember for the rest of his life. So we didn't know what they could do. Now we do. And now we know to never, ever try to find out what else they've been hiding. The Korvathi Supremacy issued a formal apology to the Terran Federation, paid reparations to New Taipei, agreed to respect all established boundaries, signed treaties they'd previously ignored, and across Korvathi space, in secure military facilities, researchers began the long, humbling process of trying to understand how the humans had done it. How one ship, one supposedly obsolete ship, had demonstrated capabilities that suggested humanity had been playing chess while everyone else was still learning checkers. They never figured it out. 50 years later, Admiral Court Vas Maroon retired with full honors. He lived another 30 years in a modest home on Korvathi Prime, tending a small garden and writing occasional articles for military journals. He never forgot the face of Captain Marcus Chun, never forgot the patient, almost sad expression of a human who had tried to warn him, who had given him every opportunity to turn back. And he never forgot the final thing Chun had said, words that haunted Court's dreams for decades. How many ships do you think you'll have left? The human captain had already known the answer. He'd been trying to save them. Epilogue. From the personal logs of Captain Marcus Chun, TFS Remembrance. They never learn. We tell them. We warn them. We give them every chance to walk away. And they still come, thinking their numbers mean safety, thinking their weapons are enough. The Remembrance isn't a warship. She's a memorial. Every scar on her hull represents a time someone didn't listen. Every patch bulkhead is a reminder that we try to prevent this. I hope today was the last time. I hope the Korvathi spread the word. Humanity has lines we will not allow to be crossed. But I doubt it. There's always another species. Always another admiral who thinks they've found an easy target. So we'll keep the old ships running. Keep the memorials active. Keep hoping that someday, someone will actually listen to the warnings. Until then, the Remembrance and her sisters will keep doing what they were built to do. Remember the cost of crossing boundaries, and demonstrate it to anyone who forgets.